If you're an adult dancer, you probably know this feeling. The teacher gives the combination once, maybe twice if you're lucky, and then the music starts. And somewhere around count 5, your brain goes completely blank. I know this feeling well, and we've all been there. Welcome back to After Class. I'm Hannah, and today we're talking about something almost every single one of us has struggled with at some point: remembering choreography. And I know that this can feel like one of those things that's just a gift that you're either born with or you're not. Like some people just have a good memory and some people don't. But I want to start by pushing back on that and then walk through some of the specific things that have really helped me get a little faster and more confident at picking up combinations. Let's get into it. So here's some really good news. The ability to memorize choreography is absolutely an improvable skill, and research backs this up. It works a lot like a muscle, something you can actually train and strengthen with use, the same way you build strength or flexibility in your body. I'll get into more details about some of the research as we go on, but for now, here's what I really want you to know. If picking up combinations feels hard for you right now, that doesn't mean you're permanently bad at it. It probably just means it's a skill you haven't intentionally trained yet. It's not a life sentence, it's just a starting point. You can get better at it. So let's get into some of the specific strategies and tips you can use in your next class to start moving the needle. The first strategy is to simplify the combination. And I want to speak directly to anyone who's newer to ballet for a second, because this one is especially helpful when you're starting out. It's not about being behind or not being capable of handling a full combination. It's just about giving your brain a more reasonable job while you're still building the base layer of your training. When you don't yet have that automatic muscle memory to lean on for basic technique and coordination, everything about a combination is new information, hitting all at once. So simplifying isn't about cutting a corner or cheating. It's letting your brain focus on memorizing one thing instead of splitting it across 2 or 3 things. My recommendation, specifically at barre, is to make that one thing the legs. So as the teacher is giving the combination, lock in on what the legs are doing and don't worry about the arms and the head so much. And honestly, this strategy can be really helpful no matter how long you've been dancing, if you're moving up a level or taking a class with a teacher you're not familiar with. In fact, just the other week, I took a more advanced class with a new teacher, and when the combination started to completely overwhelm me and I felt like I just couldn't hold it all in my brain, I just stripped it down to memorizing the legs and keeping my arm in ala second and my head forward. Doing this can allow your nervous system to relax a little so your brain can grab onto one thing versus feeling completely overwhelmed and getting nothing. You might even find that as you progress in your training, you only have to simplify on the first side. And once your brain is more familiar with the choreography, you can add the arms and the épaulement on the other side. And remember, this is a temporary strategy, not forever. Once you're consistently able to remember the choreography for your legs, you can start to incorporate the arms and the épaulement. But trying to memorize all of it at once, right out the gate, is usually a recipe for remembering none of it. Simplify first. Add the layers as your ability to memorize improves. This next strategy is one I use in every single class, and I'm so thankful to the teacher who gave it to me. Almost every combination has a place where things have the most potential to fall apart. The rest of the combination will probably take care of itself because it's following a pattern your body already understands. But then there's a count where something breaks the pattern. The working leg switches when you didn't expect it to. There's a hold where your instinct says to keep moving. The direction changes. You get what I mean. So here's the tip. When the teacher is giving the combination, specifically identify the count that's probably going to trip you up and fixate on remembering that count. So for example, say to yourself, the leg changes on 5 or hold on 7. Give your brain a specific direction for the part that's going to be the problem. Because here's the thing, if you're comfortable with the pattern, you really only need to remember where it breaks in order to retain the whole combination. You don't need to hold 32 or 64 counts of equal information in your brain. You just need to remember it's basically all the same pattern except right here. This is where it's different. That's a much smaller, more manageable task for your brain. And it means that when you get to that count, you're not caught off guard. You were expecting it, and your brain will stay locked in on what comes next instead of panicking and blanking out. Now, not everyone processes information the same way. And if you're someone who retains information better by hearing than seeing, this one's for you. Instead of trying to remember the combination purely visually while your teacher demonstrates, try remembering it musically. turn the counts into a little rhythm or a little melody in your head. And this works out really conveniently because a lot of teachers already talk about combinations this way. You'll hear things like and one, and two, three, four for a combination that's jete, jete, plie. That phrasing isn't just filler, it's actually musical information about the combination. So if you're an auditory learner, listen to how your teacher counts it out loud because they're often handing you the memory tool. For this next strategy, I want you to think about what usually happens in those little gaps in class when the teacher is adjusting the music or resetting the group or explaining something to someone else for a second. What do you do in that window? Let's be honest, a lot of us check out. We stretch, we think about dinner plans, we mentally drift off, and then the music starts up and we're scrambling. So here's the tip: use that window to quiz yourself. Close your eyes for a second if you need to, and run the combination in your head. See if you actually have it, rather than just hoping you do and banking on the person in front of you. And there's great research behind why this specific habit is so effective for improving our memorization. It's called the testing effect, or retrieval practice. And it's the idea that actively pulling information out of your memory builds a stronger, longer lasting memory. In case you're interested, this finding goes back to two researchers named Henry Roediger and Jeffrey Karpik, and it's been replicated over the years. The main takeaway here is that people who actively test themselves on something remember it significantly better than people who don't, which means you have a lot of power over your ability to retain combinations. So in your next class, make it a goal to use those small breaks between combinations to quiz yourself instead of spacing out. It's truly one of the most effective things you can do with those 30 seconds. This strategy has been a game changer for me, and I'm betting it will help you too. This next strategy is changing how I retain center combinations specifically, and I wish I'd started relying on it sooner. So, when we're learning a combination in center, a lot of us default to thinking about everything in terms of right and left. Right leg does this, now left leg does that. And that takes a lot of mental effort, especially when we switch sides, because then we have to invert everything, and what was right becomes left, and vice versa. So instead, try thinking in terms of your working leg. Usually on the first side, that will be the right leg, and then on the second side, the left leg. So for example, instead of trying to remember right leg tendus front, then glissade right, think working leg tendus front, then glissade towards the working leg. In my experience, it's so much easier to remember the choreography when I take right and left out of it and instead focus on the working leg. It might take a little getting used to, but it's worth building the habit because it really does simplify what you're trying to remember. And when you switch sides, it stops being a jumble of rights and lefts and becomes the same combination with a different working leg. This next strategy is for after class, but it's great for improving memory over time. See if you can replay the combinations in your head on the drive home, or even better, try writing them down later in the day. What were the steps? What were the counts? And maybe even the song that you did the combination to. This does two things. It's another round of that active retrieval that we talked about earlier, spaced out after class, which is exactly the type of practice that strengthens memory long term. And writing it down specifically adds even more benefit. Brain imaging research shows that handwriting activates the motor and visual parts of your brain together, syncing with the regions that form memories. Because it's slower than just running the combination through your head, you can't get away with a fuzzy, general sense of it. You have to actually pin down the specifics step by step in your words. That extra effort is what makes it stick. It's your brain's plasticity at work, literally building stronger connections. And it's that same idea that we talked about earlier in the episode about your memory being like a muscle. You don't have to do this after every single class, but even doing it occasionally, especially after a class where something felt hard to retain, is worth the 5 minutes it takes for long-term improvement. This next one is a little uncomfortable, but that's kind of the point. Try doing a YouTube ballet class at home where you don't let yourself watch the screen while you're doing the combination. Watch it or listen to it while the teacher demonstrates, and then turn away and see how far you can get on memory alone. Here's what I found and what I think a lot of you will find if you try this. We're capable of remembering a lot more than we give ourselves credit for. So much of what feels like, I can't remember choreography, is actually, I don't trust myself to remember choreography. And those are two very different problems. The first one requires work and practice. The second one just requires evidence. You just need to prove to yourself that your memory is in fact trustworthy. And testing yourself like this at home, low stakes, nobody watching, that's how you start training your focus and trusting yourself. It might be a little rough at first because following other people is a hard habit to break. I totally get it. And you might only be able to remember part of the choreography before you need to look at the screen. But if you don't give up, you will get better. And you'll start to improve your ability to lock in and remember when you know you can't rely on someone else. Okay, I've got one more for you, and this one's a little more advanced, so think of it as a bonus. Everything we've talked about so far has been about remembering choreography in the context of a ballet class. But if you perform, you know that remembering choreography under those conditions is a completely different animal. There's no mirror to rely on, there might be lights in your eyes, there's an audience, and there's adrenaline coursing through your body. So here's the bonus strategy. Take the variation or choreography you're preparing to perform, and once you know it well, run it through with some kind of distraction happening. Turn the TV on in the background, run through it while a family member talks on the phone, anything that pulls at your focus a little. The point isn't to learn something new this way, this is specifically for a piece you've already memorized. But you're testing your ability to recall that information while your brain fields distractions, which is exactly what's happening during a performance. This is called pressure training or stress exposure training, and it's used with athletes preparing for competition. The key finding is that practicing a skill under simulated pressure builds resilience for performing under pressure, including your ability to keep accessing what you've memorized. Deliberately rehearsing your variation with some noise or distraction thrown in builds specific resilience for the very thing we all fear, our minds going completely blank on stage. So if performing is part of your ballet life, don't just rehearse your variation. Train your brain to recall the choreography, regardless of what's happening around you. Which brings us back to that muscle idea from the start of the episode. Specific, deliberate practice using strategies like this will increase your ability to memorize and execute choreography. So if right now you're someone who feels like you're just bad at it, remember it's a muscle you can strengthen with a little bit of intentionality and effort. So let's recap all the strategies we've talked about. Number 1, simplify the combination, especially early on in your training. Focus on just the legs and layer in the arms and head as you progress. Number 2 is to identify the danger count and fixate on remembering that, instead of treating every count as equally important to remember. Number 3, if you're an auditory learner, focus on how your teacher says the steps and where emphasis is placed. Number 4 is to use those little gaps in class to actively quiz yourself instead of checking out. Number 5, think working leg, not right and left when you're in center. Number 6 is to try to mentally recite or write down the combinations after class. And finally, number 7, take a YouTube class at home without watching the screen. It'll strengthen your memory and your confidence. If you try one of these, I'd love to hear about it. Send me an email or a DM over on Instagram at @thebusybunhead and let me know how it goes. And don't forget to stay tuned on my website for the next session of the Bunhead Book Club, which is coming soon. If you're an adult ballet dancer who loves to read, we would love to have you join us. In the meantime, keep training that memory and giving yourself lots of grace. And I'll see you next week after class. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to share it with a friend or leave a quick review. It really helps more adult dancers find the podcast. All the links and resources we mentioned today are waiting for you in the show notes. And if you want more adult ballet content in between episodes, come hang out with me on Instagram at @thebusybunhead. See you next week after class.